Most Americans had never even heard of Project 2025. Those who had thought it was just another think tank fantasy, one of those oversized policy manuals that sit on dusty Washington shelves, read by no one, used by none. But they were wrong, dead wrong. Because in the shadows of the Heritage Foundation's brick facade in DC, a machine was already in motion. Over 900 pages, dozens of appendices, and a list of names. The plan wasn't just theoretical, it was operational. It had a timeline, it had a strategy, it had targets. And when Donald Trump won re-election in 2024, it got something even more important: power. You see, while the media was busy covering rallies, debates, and scandals, behind the curtain, Trump's campaign wasn't just preparing for victory, they were preparing for takeover. The transition team had already been quietly staffed with Heritage Foundation advisors. They had the names of officials they would fire. They had the loyalty oaths they would ask for. They even had detailed blueprints for which agencies would be dismantled and which would be weaponized. This wasn't a second term, it was a second regime. Within just 72 hours of Trump's inauguration, whispers started circulating across federal buildings in DC. Civil servants were told to clear their desks. Mid-level policy experts were re-evaluated. Internal memos hinted that their jobs might be moved to new classifications. That's when many first heard the term Schedule F. What is Schedule F? It's an executive order Trump introduced at the end of his first term, largely ignored back then, but it's now at the heart of Project 2025. The idea is deceptively simple: reclassify tens of thousands of federal workers as political appointees, strip them of civil service protections, fire them at will, replace them with people loyal to the president, not the Constitution, and it's working. Within Trump's first 100 days in office, over 12,000 federal employees were either fired, reclassified, or pushed out. Entire departments began bleeding talent. Scientists from the EPA, economists from the Treasury, legal experts from the DOJ, all gone. Who replaced them? Names we'd never heard of, but if you looked closely, you'd find a common thread. Nearly all of them had ties to far-right institutions, ultra-conservative legal groups, or Christian nationalist lobbying firms. And yet, the most dangerous changes weren't the ones on paper. They were the changes in culture, in behavior. People stopped questioning directives. Internal dissent died in silence. Employees started watching their words, avoiding public conversations, and deleting tweets. This wasn't the Washington they knew. It was something else now, something colder. Then came the executive orders, over 140 in the first 3 months, each one a stroke of the pen that rewrote American norms. Trump didn't need Congress. He didn't need to compromise. He had Project 2025, and that was enough. One order drastically expanded ICE's authority, turning immigration checkpoints into semi-military zones. Another revoked environmental protection on federal lands. Oil companies started bidding on leases near native reservations. Wildlife sanctuaries stripped of funding. Climate scientists told their departments were being restructured. But perhaps the most chilling was what happened in the Department of Education. Project 2025 calls for a complete cultural overhaul of American schooling. Not just curriculum changes, but ideological enforcement. And under Trump's appointee, a former right-wing think tank director, that vision came to life. School districts receiving federal funds were told to purge all DEI content. Anti-racism training was banned. LGBTQ+ student protections were rescinded. Patriotic education became a requirement. Teachers began receiving new guidelines: how to teach American history, how to present the Constitution, how to avoid anti-American narratives. And in the middle of all this, public broadcasting came under fire. NPR, PBS, and local affiliates faced deep budget cuts. One heritage strategist argued publicly that taxpayer-funded media must reflect the will of the nation, not elite liberal values. Overnight, thousands of journalists lost access to funding. Investigative programs were canceled. In some rural towns, public news stations went dark for the first time in decades. Meanwhile, back at the Department of Justice, a different game was being played. Trump had already made it clear he wanted his people in charge. The Attorney General's office was filled with appointees who had previously argued that presidents have near unlimited immunity. The Office of Legal Counsel began quietly issuing memos suggesting that investigations into the executive branch could undermine national unity. Federal prosecutors pursuing Trump-related cases reassigned. And in one particularly bizarre twist, a new unit was formed, the Election Integrity Task Force, whose job, despite the name, was to investigate states that didn't align with Trump's voter fraud claims. And all the while, tell the American public was confused. How could this be happening so fast? Why weren't the courts stopping it? Why wasn't the media screaming louder? The truth is, some of them were, but Project 2025 had planned for that too. In their 900-page playbook, one of the most detailed sections is about controlling narratives and rebuilding public trust in institutions. Translation: replacing dissent with propaganda. The FCC began floating new guidelines on broadcast licenses. Social media firms received subtle warnings about platform responsibility. Right-wing influencers, now boosted with federal ad dollars, began dominating online discourse. Critics of the administration were labeled domestic subversives. Civil rights lawyers were doxxed. A New York Times reporter was mysteriously audited by the IRS. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. And what about the courts? The judiciary, often seen as the last firewall of American democracy. By the end of Trump's first 100 days, 3 appellate courts had new majorities, thanks to rapid-fire confirmations rushed through the Senate. Trump-friendly senators changed procedural rules to bypass committee delays. Many of the new judges were under 45. Most were part of the Federalist Society. Some had never even tried a case before, but they had one thing in common: absolute ideological alignment with the goals of Project 2025. So where does it all lead? That's the part no one can fully answer, because this isn't just about Trump anymore. It's about an entire movement, a coalition of conservative thinkers, Christian nationalists, anti-globalists, and power brokers who believe liberal democracy is outdated. They don't want to fix the system, they want to replace it. And the terrifying thing? They might, because for the first time in modern US history, there's a functioning plan to dismantle the federal government as we know it systematically. And it's not being done in the shadows, it's being done in broad daylight, with press releases, with policy briefs, with headlines that disappear after one day. Some Americans are resisting. State governors in California, New York, and Illinois have declared themselves sanctuaries for democracy. They've refused to implement certain federal directives. Lawsuits are mounting, protests are growing, but time is running out, because every week that passes, more institutional norms are being rewritten, more agencies hollowed out, more judges confirmed. And by the time the average citizen realizes what's really happening, it might be too late to reverse it. This isn't a conspiracy theory, this isn't fiction, it's a published document. You can download it yourself from Heritage's website. It has names, it has dates, it has goals. And the White House, under Donald Trump's second term, is treating it like scripture. So the question is not whether Project 2025 will succeed. The question is, who will stop it? And if no one does, what kind of country will be left behind?